everyone, and welcome to the American Scouser podcast. Another Monday night, and we are back in action. I am your host, as always, Timuchin here in Chicago, and no Bickler tonight. So, as a public service announcement, if you live in the Brooklyn area, uh, anywhere in the vicinity, stay home, stay inside, maybe order in, work from home if you can, because Bickler is in the vicinity. So for you and everybody else's safety, I would definitely avoid the streets. But Gally is here with us. Gally, what is happening?
Just chilling in this hot, muggy, disgusting New England sector of the country. And for those in New York, I would be worried seeing that Bickler's working off of about 3.5 hours of sleep, a tough day at work. And he played a game yesterday called Escape from North Carolina. And before you know it, I'm hoping he doesn't have one of those movie episodes like Kurt Russell trying to escape from New York, because I could see Bickler setting that whole goddamn place on fire.
Yes, some of the Discord messages we saw earlier definitely alerted me more. I was going to do this PSA anyway, but I was like, definitely got to give people a heads up, because it's not only Bickler, it's the angry Bickler that is roaming around the New York over there. So, steamy Houston. Yeah, see how the tables have turned. Alan, you were bragging about how nice and warm it was while we were freezing our ass off. I'm sure it is steamy over there. I would avoid Texas this time of year, I would think. But so I would say a lot to get to normally, but really not as much to get to. Not as much happening aside from, I really thought we would have more action within this past week and close some deals before, everybody else reports. I think the national team guys are reporting tomorrow, I believe.
Yep.
If not today, tomorrow, right?
Yep, the 11th.
That did not happen. How have you been spending your days? What are you watching, since there is not that much soccer going on?
Yeah, well, I will say I watched a little of the Euro under 21s because, well, there isn't any football going on. We both know I'm not a huge MLS fan, and, well, I like my sanity enough not to watch the Gold Cup, because that might be the worst level of soccer I've ever seen in my life. And I went to like an under 8-year-old beginners match not too long ago of my friend's kids, and there was a little bit of actual fundamentally better play than what I saw from the United States and Canada combined last night for the 5 minutes that I watched the match. I still haven't even watched the highlights because, well, when you win in a penalty shootout that you don't deserve to be in, did you really win anything? What have I been watching?
Chris, yeah. Did you ask for a shirt? Like one of the 8-year-olds? Like, where you're like, let me have your jersey?
Maybe the best goddamn comment that's come up in a long time. And Chris, I have to admit, if I had thought of it, I would have brought a sign that said, "Can I have your jersey?" And I would have held it up. And then when one of them, like one of the parents came over and is like, "Why are you asking for my kids' clothes?" I'd be like, "Well, why do you let your kids do it at a soccer match?" But that is a great
comes around.
That is a great shout. And if this pod is going to go off those comments, please, listeners, get engaged. This is why we need you on these shows, especially in the summertime. Little bit of everything. We've been watching some trash TV.
What do you consider trash TV? Because that's very broad, and I would say 95% of TV would probably qualify.
Yeah, well, so we finished this, like, she's watching some show, Cruel Summers or something like that, and it's kind of interesting. They basically put out, I'm not asking kids for their clothes, you prick, it was a joke. This is what I'm talking about. It's just going to be come at Gally night.
On you already.
Can I officially restart the show and say I wish we had trivia? But
by the way, before you even go into your TV escapades, I would like to warn all the listeners over here. Alan is a binge watching series. We had at one point, not that we ever do it, but we sometimes share passwords and logins. I think it was for me to watch Dexter or something like that. And I had access to Gally's DVR. And boy, oh boy, there are some shows over there that you would not match with Gally. And yeah, Chris is right. To be fair, it would probably fit. So you'd be like, what's wrong? You could have just put it on and walked away.
Exactly. Just walked up and took it like a penny on the side of the field. warm-up pennies, right? Just walked up and been like, nah, I'm wearing one of these. I probably could have went out there and played, except for there's a good chance that I would have gotten run off of the pitch because I haven't run in a long time. I will admit, my wife is, God bless her soul, she spends so much time with me. She truly loves the sport. Like, she's really grown into watching soccer. It's not something that she ever did before we met 12 years ago. She's gotten into fantasy, as we all know, because she beats me. But she will be the first one to tell you that she was mortified when she heard you guys talk about the TV shows, because she knew they were her TV shows and she couldn't believe that I gave up the passwords, knowing that you would see things like Vanderpump Rules and Below Deck and every Real Housewives. My wife is the least dramatic human being you'll ever meet in your life, and she lives vicariously through everyone trashy in this country. And because of that,
I mean, I should also add that this was Gally's excuse. Gally used Kelly as I'm not watching these. Kelly is watching these. I was like, dude, listen, what is up with the DVR? And he's like, Kelly's watching these. I'm not watching them.
You can watch the shows that I watch. Honestly, they're all the competitive shows that she likes, like Top Chef and the cooking shows, even The Challenge. Like that's a trashy like show, but at least there's athletic like competitions in it and some like drama. And it's competitive where you're trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's bad. But she also watches probably 40% sports every week. So that's why, like, when I'm on Discord with you fools arguing about things, or I'm working on the stuff for the website, I really have to give up the television set because I take over that TV the whole time. So what about you? Other than the video games or watching Angie walk around some mountain playing some game with a backpack and a sack that I used to hear you and Bickler talk about after our shows, what are you watching these
Death
games?
Stranding. By the way, yes, if you have not played Death Stranding, you should. It's such a stupid premise that when my brother told me about it, I was like, what is the point of that? And he even said, dude, I don't even know what the point of it is. You're like a UPS dude taking package from one side to the other. But yes, it's an amazing game. We were playing that for a while. We have like same thing with the gaming. We have my games. She has her games. And then we have stuff we do together. Same thing with TV. She has some like her shows that I would never look at. There are some shows that she would never look at, like war stuff, or she's not a big documentary person or stuff like that. And then we have stuff we watch together. I'm watching Black Mirror, for example, right now that she would never watch. And I'm like,
you like it?
Fan. Oh, I love Black Mirror. I've loved, like, I would say 80% of the episodes I've been like, holy cow. But the other day, okay, we should do this as segments. What have you been watching? The other day, when it was 4th of July, over the weekend, Stitch is fine with fireworks if you're in the vicinity. But Leo was not too thrilled. His first 4th of July festivities, I think, in like a neighborhood. So was not big on it at all. And we had fireworks over. He was freaking out. So we were like, let's put something on TV for him to watch. Because there could be golden retriever porn and Stitch won't look at TV. I don't know if that exists. I'm sure it does for some sick world. But Stitch would not look at it. Leo is interested in sometimes, occasionally, and loves documentaries. So we're like, let's put a documentary on Netflix. And that, so we were watching, what is this, Chimp World or something like that, something along those lines. It's like a documentary, obviously, about chimps. Hold on, now I gotta freaking find it. Chimp Empire is called on Netflix. Fun fact, did you know that chimps eat other monkeys?
No, but it makes sense because they eat humans' faces when you keep them as pets.
See, I never put 2 and 2 together and figured out that they eat meat. Now that you say that, it does make sense. All the puzzle pieces come together. But yeah, that's what we've been watching. And then we watched this. It's on Apple TV. What is that? Hold on, I'll tell you. Hijack. It is Idris. Angie's a huge fan of Idris. I'm assuming a lot of ladies are. It's kind of like what we call easy watching, where you can even get up for a couple of minutes and come back, and you really didn't miss a whole lot. You can just keep going.
Yep.
So, Taskmaster. Yes, I would definitely Taskmaster. And Would I Lie to You? are probably two of my favorite shows. If that's the same Taskmaster we're talking about over here, I would say Would I Lie to You is even better, but that's just me. But obviously, we're not watching a lot of soccer over here. But I did catch some soccer, did my own scouting, and I was like, hey, I saw this young kid. I'm like, dude, we should sign this guy. This is the kind of guy we need for our midfield. Lo and behold, I find out afterwards we actually have this freaking guy. I went back to the old episodes and I hear you and Bickler just raving about this guy as the next Arda Güler, if you will. So so where are you at with this? All joking aside, everybody's obviously like, oh, it's going to be like a new signing and stuff like that. But especially with these two new guys coming, there's still talk about Lavia and Thuram. I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll talk about the likelihood of those. But where do you sit with Curtis and his role? And did anything change when you watched, if you watched any of this or even caught the highlights or the news about the tournament?
So clearly you were only watching recent replays if you heard Bickler and I raving about him. Because if you watch some replays from the first half of the season, or this time last season, all you would have heard was he's not good enough for this club. And basically, this is me telling Jamie he might have been right. So luckily, he's not in the comments section. Hopefully, he doesn't hear that. But the real point of this is I did watch a few of the matches, all the highlights, and I did watch the final. I think he was one of the players of the tournament. Like, I'd put him in the top 5. And he definitely has proven that at 23 years old, he is right in the wheelhouse of being a player that can be considered part of the future of this club. That said, he's our 4th best midfielder at this point, in my opinion. Like I think both the guys, I think both guys you bought are starting over him. Oh, I would tell you right now, he's above Thiago in the depth chart. He's not above Henderson for getting a start against Chelsea, but I think, Henderson has a different role now. I genuinely believe Henderson is going to play more than Milner did last year, but is going to be more of a James Milner-esque player for the club this season. So I think Curtis Jones has kicked on, but I think they bought players to make sure that wasn't a 10-game span and a good summer for the under-21s. I think they bought players that are better than Curtis right now that will continue to push him on to fight for his place in this 11. So he's great cover, in my opinion, with a big upside.
Yeah, because I know, at the end of the last season, you guys put a stock real high. And I was very cautious because, especially end of the season, because the pressure gets a lot less compared to the early season where you have to get the 3 points and stuff like that. The kind of like the dynamic changes. And obviously the role changes. But yes, he was probably in that stretch at the end of the season our best midfielder. I only ended up watching the Israel game, but it's to me, more than the eye test, just hearing about the fact that he's continuing that form is a good thing. And as well as winning. And I think that's like kind of like getting the mojo and the confidence and stuff like that. Having said that, do you think he has learned his lesson? Because I know in this show we talked about his biggest strength is at the same time his biggest weakness, his over-the-top cockiness and stuff like that. You think, having been humbled by dropping and not getting playing time and stuff like that, you think he will have found that mix of having the confidence and the cockiness? Because you could see some of that cockiness was back. I like to say I only watched one game in full, where you could see with some of the stuff he was doing, like Curtis is back kind of a thing. But do you think he'll have the perfect mix now between having that cockiness, but at the same time knowing that I got to perform? It's not all about, tricks and back heels and turns and twists.
I do think that is the case. And if you only saw the Israel match in full, I could see where you'd say the cockiness part, because he was very cocky in that match. But it was kind of easy for him, because once they went up 2-0, it was over. You made a great point earlier about how important maybe winning this tournament and being part of a winning side, and not just a winning side. He was a starter in every match that mattered, and he finished every match that mattered. And I think that says a lot. Like, he was almost undroppable, unsubbable at a U21 level that might be one of the best sides England's ever put out together.
Yeah.
There was a ton of talent there, like all across the Premier League. And I joked with you earlier in our show prep, and I was like, the only thing that kind of scares me and irritates me is every player I didn't know their name, I'd look them up, and every one of them is a Manchester City academy player. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, like, the entire national team is littered with their academy kids who aren't good enough to play at their club. That's how good they're getting as a squad. But that's an argument for a different day. I think for Curtis, he played great. He played within himself, but he was still willing to try the back heels and the flicks and the tricks. But I don't feel like he was doing it at a position that put his teammates in a place where they were going to have to make up for his mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we always used to see. And that was when I used to raise my hand and be like, it's great that he tries step overs. I just wish he wouldn't do it when the right back is ahead of him up the pitch.
Yeah.
Right. And we saw that too often. So if he cuts those mistakes out, and I also think playing on the left-hand side just suits his game better. I really believe that. I think playing with Mo, he almost wants to be too fancy and try to get ahead of him. What I love about Curtis is he truly makes runs that no other midfielder currently in our setups had been making since basically Genie left. He makes those runs into spaces and tries to get into attacking areas on the pitch because he has confidence in himself to not only get there, that if he gets there, he can do something with those opportunities. So I'm really excited to see how he flourishes with a better defense behind him and maybe better forward play ahead of him. You know, Nunez not running in circles and it being Diaz and Jota knowing where to be and Gakpo, etc. I think the sky's the limit. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely promising. I'm still not, all right, let's go. It's a new signing kind of a deal.
Nope.
Because we've seen kind of the dip. And I think knowing that you have to, and that's to be expected, right? I mean, young player, that is to be expected, to not constantly having like increasing scale for form. You can expect an occasional dip in here and there. It's part of the learning process. But that's why I don't know how many of those processes are we going to have, or has he finally found himself the role and stuff like that, especially now facing more competition in this midfield. Matush was posting it earlier. So Handa, Alexis, Fab, Soboslai, Curtis, Harvey, Basetic, Thiago. It is fun to see all those games together, mainly because at least 6 of them you can see being healthy most of the time. Right? I mean, I think this is scary in that sense, where last year when everybody was saying midfielders, Klopp went out there and counted 8-9 midfielders, but half of them were not even training. They were like getting treatments. So that's why we were like, yeah, but what happens when something happens to this guy? And boom, that's what ended up happening. So the other kid that I really liked over there is this Harvey kid. If he only had a ponytail, he would be a better player. But no, seriously, Harvey, how do you think this tournament has affected him? More importantly, how do you think like the new signings and Curtis's form, what kind of an impact does it have on Harvey?
I won't lie, I'm a little worried about Harvey, and I worry about him because in the English setup, they basically played him as part of their front three. They didn't play him in the midfield engine. When he got minutes on the wing. When he succeeded in the championship, it was minutes from the wing. Really, the only good match I remember him having the second half of the season was against Wolves when he got the winner in the FA Cup playing from the wing. And we all talk about how our current formations don't really support him playing in the front three because of his pace and his size. But I also think his size hurts him in our midfield, especially if we're playing with Trent moving up. So I think this is a big, big year for Harvey. I still think there's a huge talent there, but I think, maybe all along, Paul's been asking for there to be a backup at the senior level for Mo. And it might just be Harvey Elliott. It just means a change in actual tactics when he gets his chances to play. Because I don't know he gets into that midfield with those 8 names you just rattled off.
I was going to ask you, like, maybe Harvey's name should not even be here. Harvey's name there should be another midfielder coming in this equation, especially for Fab's spots.
Yep.
Knowing we don't know how well Basetic is going to be back and, when he's going to be actually fully healthy to come back and, be a part of the team again. And then Harvey go to this hey, like a young, I mean, we've been talking about maybe signing a young winger project behind Mo kind of thing. And I think, yeah, Harvey could be that guy based on what we're seeing and probably what is suitable for him as well. Because I do agree, size wise, I think he's not as good. I really like his chemistry with Trent. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, with Mo going forward. But especially with Trent's role changing, that could be like a totally different ordeal this season. So that's kind of like canceled that equation. Chris says it's always been an opinion that midfield is the hardest position on the pitch. Hard not to stand out when you had a bad game and you're always involved in the transitions, constantly on the move. Being consistent in that position is extremely hard. I do agree with that, but at the same time, I feel like it's a lot easier to have an average game as a midfielder. Would you agree? Because I think you can do a lot of things. You might not be on your game, but you can do a lot of things with your work rates to make up for maybe your poor passing that day or missed tackles or whatever. Because you can still win bowls and make yourself useful, if you will, in that midfield with your work rates. Whereas as a defender, if you have a bad game, it's probably pretty painful. And as a winger or somebody like that, somebody in the attacking line, if you're having a poor day, you don't get as many chances to make up for it, first of all, because you don't get the ball as much as a midfielder.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you can sum that up in one example. And you have to go no further than look at the scum and look at a guy like Fred and the fact that they paid $50 million for Fred and then 4 different managers keep putting him in the lineup, even though everyone wants him benched and says he's not good enough, but 4 different managers almost made him one of the first names on the team sheet, because I think Fred is a great example of a guy who kind of shows how you can work hard and just be in the right places on the pitch and be average. And people say like, well, he wasn't terrible today. He didn't do anything too poorly. And I don't know that we have any of those midfielders in our side. I think, as we always say, right, the unappreciative Liverpool supporter, the haters on Twitter, will tell you that Jordan Henderson's been nothing but bang average his whole entire Liverpool career. He passes the ball sideways. I don't think Jordan Henderson's average. You know that. But I do think being a guy like Henderson and working your ass off, start to finish of every single match, and never putting a foot wrong and surely not doing the wrong thing to represent your club, does sometimes, it's the James Milner, it's the industry in your play, can maybe make up for shortcomings, where no matter how industrious you are, if you don't cover Mitrovic on the back post on a cross, and the guy climbs over your back and heads it in, all anyone's going to remember is you failed, even if you had 2 assists that game. See Trent.
Yes. I think, with Henderson, I think he's one of those guys, and you need those guys in your midfield that's going to make everything else go. He's kind of like enforcer of the system, an enforcer of everything that's happening midfield. And I know if you're just watching highlights, and you don't see Henderson a lot in the highlights, or if you're only after the assist or the goal, you're not seeing a lot of stuff Henderson does. I still think I do hope we do get that from McAllister, for example, and I've seen it at Brighton, is the fact that he moves the ball fast. He does not hang on to the ball. I still think that's like the biggest thing that, for example, with Thiago, that I'm not a big fan of. He just hangs on to way too long. Yeah, Chris says that's why we failed last season. Our midfield were on Fred's level. And honestly, hey, just stick up for Fred over there. Fred plays midfield on a team full of stopping and non-pressing defending attackers. So
100%.
That dude has to clean up so much shit. He played behind like Ronaldo, like Anthony. He plays like Martial. He plays like behind like Fernandez. All these guys that do not put defensive work and let all these guys come at you. And he's a defensive midfielder, but like he's like the guy who's like standing in front of a full speed truck, is like, hold on, and then he just like gets toppled over, and that not being his fault.
While having to play in front of Maguire and freaking Lindelof. Like,
that's what he's protecting those guys.
Like, if you think about it, the dude was just set up poorly, almost as poorly as taking the name Fred coming out of Brazil.
Yeah, he was in a shit sandwich over there. between that back line and the non-defining. I know this is to Mo for a statue against Manchester United. His best assist that comes to mind from the last several years from the whole team. You know what? Yes, that's quite the pass. I was actually just watching because I fell into one of those YouTube holes yesterday, and there was like this whole thing about like United games, and that's it's a long video, people. When you watch the last year's, how many times we beat up on them, and yeah, that ball that he wins that ball as well with his work rates and that like one touch pass. Like I say, Hendo does a lot that goes unseen, and those people you're never gonna change the minds of. I just don't think they're just watching it like they're not. Just stop and watch Hendo if you really want to see what he's doing, not like only when he has the ball.
You were spot on with the comment about Thiago, though. I always pound on him, so I didn't go there. That's why I went to basically saying just see Fred. Honestly, if you really take off the rosy red Liverpool glasses, Thiago's 2 years with Liverpool, 3 years with Liverpool, whatever it's been, has been average, if not underwhelmingly below it because of how injured he's been. Like, there haven't really been that many moments, if you really think about it, that you just say to yourself, wow, Thiago today. I mean, some of the best moments that whole time were when he was hurt and Keita was actually playing the best football he'd ever played, playing in that left-hand side for a consistent run of games. And, he's injured before the big cup finals. He comes off in all the big matches. And I know there's rumors that if any player were to leave the club for a fee this summer, it would be him. I don't see it happening. But I'll be honest, if it did, I'd probably have to say it's good business because we're a year away from that guy just showing us crazy eyes and probably being frustrated that he's not playing as much as he wants to.
Yeah, we were talking about this on Friday, and I did catch a lot of flack for preferring to lose Thiago over Henderson. I feel like Henderson is more valuable to this team right now than Thiago. I think the one thing with Thiago, because we were trying to give him a grade of their careers, and I think one thing, if you look back, obviously Keita is probably like the easiest comparison in terms of, what we expected out of them on the field kind of thing, probably. I feel like Keita has had a lot of good games and then has had some clunkers along the way. I think with Thiago, you just have not had either of those. Like, he's always been like slightly above average, slightly below average, like didn't stick out too much as a poor performance, but wasn't like over the top great performance either. Whereas Keita, I mean, I can recall a couple of games, it was just like, get this guy out of there. Like, it's like Rocky is like, throw the damn towel, just take him out. And then, or he's been like, man, this is the guy we bought. Like there were some games where I was just, like I say, like that United game and stuff. You're like, this is the guy that we thought we were getting. I think with Thiago, I don't know if it was because we did the same thing with Coutinho when Coutinho was here. And I think maybe it's like a mindset thing. Maybe it's like what fans expect transfers onto the field. When you have a player like that, it seems like the temptation is to give him the ball and say, well, let's see what you got. Ping that ball, baby. Like, through a ball, here's the assist, here's your moment kind of thing. Whereas everything else stops. Instead of Thiago, our most boring midfields of Fab, Hendo, Genie that everybody was bitching storms about, it freaking created a ton of opportunities, maybe not directly, but with what they did off the ball or by giving the ball to the guy that's going to create opportunities.
It won the Champions League and the league. I'd say it did pretty well.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's why Thiago, like, we kind of expected him to come in and, have a magic wand and be like, close, sitting back, low block defense, pling, here's a goal kind of a thing. And it just did not happen. Is that because he kind of does not really fit the system at the end of the day? Or it's just the Premier League? I mean, the dude's talent he's a joy to watch. And I really think they will love him in Saudi Arabia just because of, his ball. You can see the Brazilian in him as you watch him.
So I think the Premier League was never built for him. If it was built for him to come when he left Barcelona, not when he left Bayern Munich.
That's fair.
Because he went through some serious injuries at Bayern, and he was 3.5 years older. So I just think he wanted the challenge, and I think he really wanted to come be part of something special at Liverpool, and he thought he was the missing piece. He thought he would unlock the defenses. And when we played a Burnley, right, or we played Sean Dyche at Everton, we'd bring him on, and he'd score a great goal, or he'd create something with some miraculous vision pass that no one else on our side could pick out. We signed 2 players right now that are younger and technically just are as technically gifted as far as they have the ability to grow into it. I don't want to say either of them are Thiago. He's an all-time great Barcelona player. I don't think that's fair. Yeah. But I think we bought those players because we found them at a younger age with a bigger idea towards an improvement. We bought those players, though, because Thiago hasn't proven to be good enough.
I think part of it was we brought Thiago when, I mean, everything was perfect. We were at the peak. He was the cherry on top.
Yep.
And then the cake collapsed. And then the cherry gets lost in the mush.
Right. When the ice cream melts, the cherry just becomes a mushy fucking cherry.
Yeah, he's just like swimming around aimlessly. And I think that's what ended up happening. I think I'm looking at the like season ahead now, because you talked about him getting minutes and opportunities and stuff like that. Do you agree? I guess we were talking about it in the morning. If we're up in a game 2-0 in the 70th minute, I think that's a good game to put Thiago in, to control the ball, control the game, close it out. But if we're only winning it 2-1, I think that's what I'm putting Hendo in, to close the game, to kick everybody else in gear and do it that way, as opposed to Thiago, who might try to get the third goal, but it can also cost you the second goal while he's doing that.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'll take it a step further. I think if you're making 2 substitutions in a 2-1 game or a 1-0 game, I think you're bringing Henderson in for one of the midfielders you want fresh legs, and you're bringing Jones in for the other. Like, I still don't think Thiago in that situation is honestly at this point above Jones in the pecking order, because I'm assuming at our finest this season, it will be the 2 new signings flanked outside of Fabinho. That is because I am just staying true to the fact that Fabinho is going to bounce back. The defense is going to be better behind him. The midfielders are going to be better next to him, and he's going to get back to some level of form. Hopefully him and his wife aren't having a baby this year, so 90% of the fan base can have a built-in excuse for why a man played abhorrently poor. I just feel like it has to be. Like, I think Thiago has to be.
I guess normally I would be like, yeah, that sounds about right. Because if you just look at quality or do it FIFA style, go by ratings, overall ratings, you're like, yeah, you put those guys in, the top guy in each position. But do you see it happening with Klopp, or is he still going to have somebody like Henderson out there or Jones out there who's more familiar with the system?
Maybe at the beginning of the year, we talked about this last week, right? I think we talked about who we think is the starting midfield. Yeah. And I said, I think it'll be Henderson, Fab, and McAllister on opening day. And I won't even be shocked if Jones is in there for McAllister, if Klopp really thinks he hasn't had time to learn the system. I think they bought these players, though, for a transitional movement forward. And, when we start looking at the other expiring contracts that are coming up next year, the year after, if we don't start making some shrewd signings, there's going to be another massive upheaval. And Klopp's only got 2 more years left. So I do think Klopp wants to leave this like a machine going forward, and his legacy continues. I don't think he wants this to be Sir Alex and literally throw everything into the last season, try to win a title, and know that he's leaving United for 10 years barren to be a club that falls off. I think Klopp wants to leave us in a place that continues his great plan, and he has to turn over this squad to do it. And I truly believe this season is the one. I think he's going to be a little ruthless this year with players, which, is juxtaposed to everything I've ever said on this podcast, because I've usually criticized him for being too loyal.
Yeah, Chris brings up a good point that I know, like Anna brought up on Friday's morning show about, Thiago staying, especially for Besetic, with the common language and stuff like that, being that's maybe almost taking over a little bit of a Milner role in terms of like the experience and the know-how and stuff like that. And I can see that, but going back to what you're talking about, so let's look at the expiring contracts. Like 2024, you have Matip, you have Adrian's contract expiring again, and you have Thiago. Doesn't it sound like a golden time in some ways to move Thiago, because there would be a market for him, I believe, in Saudi Arabia, just because of the caliber of player he is, and not only that, he's entertainment. Like, he's entertaining to watch. We talked about this before. I know there was even a short out. Like, I don't think like Henderson, when he goes there, the Saudis are going to be like, oh, great, let's go watch Hendo run and press.
No, they'll probably just complain about him. They've just figured out how to complain in a new language.
Sideways. But people would go and watch Thiago just, roll around the ball and move his ankles and do like those crossovers and stuff like that, the crazy eyes, the whole works. So it would be somebody who would attract that money. But do you think he's too valuable for this transition period and we run out yet another contract?
I do think in this case, and I think, I'd like to sell him because I've been advocating getting fees for years. Or the whole time I've been on this podcast, I've been advocating we don't recoup fees and then we complain why we don't have transfer money. Saudi Arabia makes a lot of sense. It doesn't sound like he's really keen or interested to go because he's 1 year away from being a free agent and going anywhere he wants. So, I saw links to the Turkish league, to the Galatasaray. Fenerbahce was one, and then there were links today to Galatasaray, I think, the ones who won last year, and saying that they could use a midfielder like him and that he's had talks with them. The only way I see him going there is he thinks he could play there for 1 year, get a lot more minutes, and then be more marketable and force his way out next year. Because it feels to me like he either wants to go back to Barcelona and try to end his career. And then there are some people that think he really wants to come to America because marketability-wise, he knows he could come to MLS and he could do the things you're talking about. I mean, it's a slower league. He'd have more time on the ball. His tricks would be loved. And he could extend what is a budgeting after football career. And I think Chris mentions how multilingual he is. I think he speaks 5 languages, including 2 of the different languages they speak in Brazil, which helps the South American players, while also helping the Spanish and Portuguese players. So maybe he is too important to this revolution at this point with all the new players coming in. But I don't know. All I heard last year was that Darwin couldn't speak English and there was no one on the team that could help him get by. So let me just tell you, the language barrier is a little tough.
Yeah, he was calling Thiago. He's like, hey, can you order pizza for me? Because I can't call. But, I mean, the thing with Thiago is he's like 32 right now. So when he runs out the contract, he's going to be 33. I almost get the fact that, and I mean, he has like kids and stuff. Maybe he did not want to make that transition there and only move once. That's why I don't think the Turkey stuff, definitely not Fenerbahce, even though they got a ton of money from the whole Arda Güler thing and now they're selling Attila and stuff like that. I just don't think they're going to get, because if Liverpool is going to sell, we know Liverpool, it has to be at least 20, right? For Liverpool
minimum
to think about it, it would have to be at least 20. No Turkish team is going to be able to afford 20 one way or the other. And if he's not after the wages, which he clearly is not, if he's not going to Saudi Arabia, or he feels like, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this before. If you don't really need the money, and more than likely he doesn't, why take your kids and do all that kind of stuff to your family where you can be, if you're happy where you're at in your environments and you're going to be valued, why the hell not stay? But you're okay with them, because I know you're Mr. Don't Run Out contracts, but you're okay with running out this one.
I feel like you've gotten this far with them, and I don't know that you'll get the fee you want. If they found a suitor, I would take it all day. If you got money for him and you felt you were solid,
and says 12 million.
I would consider that. Okay. I would, because I think that puts 12 million into the coffers, whether it's to add to the Lavia bid or it adds to maybe enticing Colwell, or it's money you save for January, because, whether Matip resigns a new deal to extend another year on his contract so we don't fear losing him or not, there's 5 or 6 huge players coming up in 2025 that you have to make real decisions on soon about renegotiated contracts that are going to seriously change your wage scale, including maybe the most important player at the entire club at this point.
Nate Phillips.
Well, I mean,
It
He's
does.
gonna start. He's gonna start. He's gonna start with Van Dyke finally, right? I'm finally gonna get my wish.
He
Jesus.
puts his head in everything. So Matip, Adrian, and Thiago, we're probably running all of them out unless the Saudis come around the corner and drop a bag of cash. And more importantly, we don't know if Thiago wants to go or
Correct.
interested at all. And he
Yep.
might not be because, as Chris says, he's already on pretty high wages. No Saudi wages, mind you. That's like a whole different level. But still, he's on pretty high wages. And
third-
let me see.
He's the third highest player at the club.
Yeah.
Only Van Dyke and Mo make more than him, and I believe he's over 230,000 a week.
Yeah, that's good cash. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Why not? So 2025 is a lot scarier. Let's start with the easy ones. Phillips, you would think, God hopes that he would be gone by then, right? He would be sold by then.
I'm hoping he's gone by September 1st.
Even I guess it depends on what we bring in for the homegrown numbers. I think that's Scott. A
Yep.
player that, I think people were too high on too early is Costas. And his contract runs out 2025 as well. Where are you with that one?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't have as much of a feel for the youth academy players, especially the ones who went out on loan. So I don't know what we have for like the depth at that position. I would have been trying to get a fee for him last summer. I would definitely be trying to get a fee for him now if I could. He's a Greek international player, and I think we would be very well off to get some money because you let him get into his last 12 months and he'll see out his contract and just sign a foreign deal in January and you'll know you're losing him for nothing.
Yeah, I just don't think he would be worth. Depends on obviously the extension that you would put on the table for him, but I just don't think he would be. And yeah, I agree with Brian in terms of like cashing it because I think we saw that. Not that I don't like him as a player overall, I just feel like what we saw. I talked about with Robertson, right? We kind of saw some of his weaknesses when Van Dijk stopped being Superman, and I think we saw even more of that on Costas. And we were like, oh, he's just as good as Robertson. He's we don't lose a step. Yeah, we never lost a step because Superman Van Dijk was on the squad at the time. I think when Van Dijk became human, that left side got a lot more exposed. And I think Costas got more exposed than Robertson, who is the other name who I would think you extend. If nothing else, he ends up becoming that, maybe like the Milner or Henderson personality on the squad.
Yeah, I think if you can extend him, you do. I also think he'll be 31 years old at the end of that contract, so you got to be careful with what wages you're putting him on when you extend him, and how long. Because, again, these aren't guys who are young in the tooth. We bought Andy Robertson right at the start, if not right past his prime.
Yeah. That's true. I still feel like, I guess it depends on what you do with Costas, though, right? If you're bringing like a young, like a backup originally instead of Costas, his understudy or whatever, I can kind of see Robertson in like a long-term role moving forward in the same spot and extending him. Trent is a no-brainer, obviously, right?
Yeah, I heard the reports were today that there's some extension talks happening right now. I think you signed Trent for the long haul. He's the most important person at the club, in my opinion, at this point.
How about, okay, so it's getting trickier now. Henderson. I know Mateusz is sending him to Sunderland. We were just talking about it this morning. Are you keeping Henderson, or Henderson is going to be at that age where like it's time to go?
I would let Henderson go, and I think Mateusz is spot on. I said the greatest way for him to end his career is find a way to captain Sunderland back to the Premier League, and it would be the single-handed like greatest story of a footballer going home and doing the right thing for the boyhood club. And I think they would love him for it, just like Milner will play forever. I think Henderson will try to play forever. He's probably got to do that at the Stadium of Light.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was giving Mateusz a lot of crap over it, but it does make sense. And I think for a player who plays off of energy, age is a bigger hit than anything else. Having said that, obviously Milner is still going at it, so I don't know if he would do like another year contract. I almost feel like I can see him doing one more year while Klopp is still there until Klopp's contract runs out and stay till like 2026 that way. Konate, no brainer. Get an extension in early
Yeah,
now.
I think it has to be. I think you have to be trying to make that move right now and lock him up and know that he's the linchpin of the right-hand side of your defense, especially if you're going to keep this formation. Because I think what allowed Trent to go forward, as much as you mentioned great points about Matip showing on the ball that time and how valuable he would be, what Konate does is use his pace to make up for the space that Trent leaves by going forward. And I think that we see that. He still has a rash challenge in him and a mistake, but he is very young as well. And I think we forget that because he looks like a mountain of a man who basically looks like he might be like the oldest guy on the team.
Yeah, I mean, as a center back, he's a kid. So he's got like a long career ahead. So I guess the biggest issue with him so far has been how reliable is he going to be? For a young kid, he has lost a lot of time due to injuries. So I don't know if the club waits another year to see how reliable and how important he will be. And it also goes to with this guy right here, Van Dijk's contract running out then.
So I'm going to say
Van Dijk next year, I guess, will be the ultimate question.
I'm going to say something here that I think no one on this podcast will agree with, or probably anyone listening, except for maybe Bickler, who isn't here, of course, to back me up, which means he probably wouldn't if he was. I truly believe that this is Virgil van Dijk's final year with the club. And I'll tell you why. I don't see him taking a huge pay cut. I see someone in Europe being willing to offer him a big deal and another opportunity, whether that be Italy or other places where it's slower. I genuinely think Virgil van Dijk will never be okay with not being the number one man. And they need to replace him if they're going to continue to play at this level. And I can't see giving a 33-year-old player who has an injury that's decreased since his injury another big, huge contract. And I don't see him taking so much less money just to stay. I could be totally wrong, but I genuinely believe this is his last year.
Well, you're not alone, buddy. Everybody's agreeing with you. So maybe.
Hey.
So people, let me ask you this then.
Doesn't usually go well.
Performance, the Van Dijk that comes back this year, does that affect that in any way?
If the club stays true to their ethos and their process, it doesn't. Because his age, his position, and the attributes that make him special are all things that analytically decline over time. And for me, they would be going against everything that they've built in the last 7 years in transfers if they were to give Virgil van Dijk basically a salary based on his history and not his merits going forward. And I don't think they will. They weren't worried that Mo wasn't going to be great if he re-signed. They were worried they couldn't afford him, so they took it right to the last minute. I think this is different. And I think they can get a fee for him next year from somewhere that recoups enough money to go get a solid, reputable replacement.
And I think you would, because, again, he's a center back. And here's the thing. We're talking about his qualities diminishing for this freaking system that plays like a ridiculously high line. So another top team, he could be the ideal fit. And look at freaking, Sergio Ramos and stuff like that going to PSG. So he would fetch a lot of money because I think he will be really valuable and a number one center back, even with diminished speed, just because of the way they play.
Imagine Van Dijk playing in some of these defensive setup teams that play back a little bit in Italy. Yeah. Against slower players like Lukaku, just putting them in their pocket. He would be great at Inter Milan, to be honest. He'd be good at AC Milan. I think Italy makes the most sense. And I genuinely think, too, he has such a high level of confidence in himself. I just can't see him ever competing. And they have to buy a player that competes with him, whether it's this summer, next January, or next summer. Because he's not going to be here forever. And we know his importance, right? We know it. We've seen it. It's palpable. It's real. For me, this is it.
I don't know if I can say that he does, because he's never been in that situation. I mean, you know what I mean? He's never been in that situation where he's had to compete or he had somebody to push him. Because honestly, where are you going to push him? Like he was the best of the best. So not
It's
much
true.
choice. I think
It's
this
true.
would be a season where you kind of see this is a big season, I think, to see what Van Dijk, certain players, I think Van Dijk, Robertson, Fabinho, we have some players that we're hoping that make that shift back to where they were. Because I think that's really the key to the whole season over here. You can bring all the new names you want in, but some of your guys that dipped either have to bounce back or at least stop that dip. And with the addition of the new players, you get back to where you were. And I think Van Dijk is one of them. I really want to see, because we talked about this before, and I know, and I think you're the one who brought it up, that he's, his style is cocky. But at the same time, does he come to the realization that I'm not that fast anymore, and you kind of adjust how you play, how you go into a tackle and stuff like that, your timing and things like that. And I think he's smart enough of a player, and I think he's mature enough of a player now that he would make that adjustment. But that's just a gut feeling. We really don't know because he's never been in this situation before. So it's going to be like a big season to find that out. Last guy whose contract is up is Mo.
So this is tough for me too. I'm not going to lie. What he's doing at this age kind of defies logic. If Mo wants to re-sign with the club at the end of this season coming up, I would entertain another contract for Mo Salah because you can't change 25 goals a year and 35 goal involvement. And he does it every year. He gets out of bed and, he puts up gaudy, ridiculous statistical numbers. At the same time, you can't build around the same players forever. And we're building a system around, there's going to have to be a move for Darwin and Diaz and you still have Jota and you're going to sign other players and hopefully Carvalho gets folded in and maybe a young kid comes out of the academy. If the right offer, say Saudi Arabia still has money and they offer 50, 75 million next summer and he's open to the idea of taking it because he's a year older, you consider it. But unless the man literally has a major injury or something changes, I think you just consider giving him, carte blanche to re-sign deals. But it's got to be realistic because if I'm Mo, I want that 350 to become 500,000 a week, and we all know that's not going to happen here. So, because by then it might be Gakpo making 400,000 or Diaz making 300,000. Like they got contracts coming and they're young. And we're trying to sign Sloboslai and all these guys again, right? Like, so it's going to be really, really interesting. We still don't know. Are FSG still the owners? Are we working under the same parameters?
We're kind of assuming we are, but you don't know.
Exactly. I think you keep Mo, though, as long as you can for that. What about you? Are you keeping Mo straight up if you got a $75 million
depends on this season? Okay. I think it really depends on the season. I think I do the same thing with Van Dijk. If this team bounces back like we're hoping and goes back to its good days, and you're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we just need his future backup and stuff like that. Yeah, but I feel like you have a similar season to this season, like Rocky, where you're kind of like, man, this guy's getting too old. You got to replace this position, this position, this position. That's, I think, I give the same answer to Van Dijk. That's when you say, hey, we got two guys that can easily bring you 150 to 200 million probably if you send to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia money is not going to run out for a while. And Chris says he will be a guidance. He would be. That's the thing. He would fetch a lot of money. If he was available right now, I would agree if he was available right now, he would fetch a lot of money in other clubs as well. But a year down the road, yes, he would still fetch a lot of money in Saudi Arabia. And I think if you are not there and you feel like you go into another offseason where you're like, we need 4 or 5 players to get back to where we were, where is that money going to come from? Players only getting more expensive. You have these two guys that you can get, especially with the FSG model. You sell these two, you will get 4 or 5.
And I will just say, don't rule out PSG losing Mbappe on a free and stumping up 80 million for the replacement that can score 40 goals in France. And he thinks to himself, that allows me to stay in Europe, continue to bang huge goal numbers, have a chance at the Champions League, and play in a league that's less taxing and less demanding on my body. And I'm still at the top level. So I've always thought PSG, he looks like a guy who could fit the PSG uniform. I hate saying that because that makes it sound soft, but he does. He looks like a guy. When Messi went to PSG, I was like, he kind of fits in. I could see Mo prancing around Paris and crushing it and not missing it much.
And for a guy like Mo, Saudi Arabia is always there. And I think that's the biggest thing. You know, like he can go to PSG, heck, after us for 2 more years and go over to Saudi Arabia as a 37-year-old and still get a lot of money just because he is Mo. I mean, I think we kind of underestimate how he's seen. I mean, Chris Strange says like he'll be a god there. I mean, yeah, I mean, he's like pretty much a god there now. He'll be getting paid like God, and regardless of what his age is. So he can go there as a 35-year-old, 36-year-old, and I think he would still be paid handsomely because he brings his Mo-ness, if you will.
The one thing I will say, because I had kind of given you these because I made a spreadsheet of players, and I'm kind of looking over here. Anyone that's like, why does he keep looking to the right? One thing that's kind of crazy is when you look at the reverse of this, right? The players who are signed the longest. So it's the 2 new signings and 3, right? It's Gakpo, Dominic, and McAllister, all signed through 2028. Then you go to Jota, Carvalho, Harvey Elliott, Allison Becker, which is probably the most important, signed through 2027 because he stays that consistency. Then you have Gomez, Bacetic, Diaz, and Jones, and Jurgen Klopp, signed through 2026. And the point, the reason I make those ones is like, I almost feel like this is about Klopp, like running down his contract. We know he's going to leave. And I think these moves are all about like how the team bounces back next year and the year after. Because I could see 2026 being a true transition season, or I could see it being an all eggs in the basket, sell a couple guys, buy a few new players. Like we're not betting in 6 this year because we're going for it with these guys who now Gakpo's been here 4 years and Jota's been here 5. And these guys have bet in. Hopefully Darwin's a stud. You know, and I'm not saying every one of those guys makes it, but you can see there is a core foundation that if you can add Trent and Ibra into that, you're only really picking up a piece or 2 here or there. A new left back for Robertson, a new center back for Van Dijk, a new right wing for Mo. So we actually are in a really good place contract-wise. We just have 5 of our biggest players of the 5 most important years all coming up next year.
Yeah.
Which feels really awkward for me to have it all be in the same season. So I'm hoping to get some announcements this year.
You would think, yeah, a couple of them, especially like Konate and Trent and stuff like that, you would think those will be done early. And I really think how the season pans out will determine what we do next summer. Obviously, more ways than one, especially like in extensions and stuff. But before we go over here, let me ask you this. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about like Lavia and stuff. I didn't even get to throw our freaking radar out there. It's only July 10th. I'm already at the bullshit meter. I'm out of the radar over here. But if there are no signings, this is how we roll out. How satisfied with the summer are you? Like, are you okay?
No, I'm a 6 out of 10 if we do nothing else. And honestly, I'd even be a 7 out of 10 if we sell a couple assets, because at least then you told me there weren't players you wanted to your profile to buy, but you sold some players and you put some money back in. So maybe in January, if you need to strengthen, you can. We've proven we can make deals that are valued in January. Van Dijk, Diaz, Coutinho, Gakpo. These are all like really good signings that happened in a January transfer window. So our club knows how to operate there. If we sign one player remaining and it's a center back who's a legitimate long-term replacement for Van Dijk or challenge to it when we need cover, I'd say it's a 7. If you got me Lavia and Colwell, I'd tell you it was a 10, maybe a 12.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get even Lavia and a center back, I'm at like the 8 and 9 and stuff in terms of what you needed and what you got.
Agree.
I mean, obviously, yeah, you wish you got everybody, but in terms of like the needs you went to the store with and what you came back home with, I think you would give like an 8 or 9 overall. But let's see. I'm not going to be setting promises because Matush was on my case this morning because I guaranteed signing. So I'm not guaranteeing shit. But we will see what happens. And if we get 1 or 2 more across the line, because the first preseason is the 19th, I believe, Karlsruhe
It's crazy.
game. So by then, you would think you want to get these names in camp. I know some of these national players would not be there anyway, so maybe you're not losing out in that sense, like a guy like Caldwell or Thuram and play stuff like that. But let's see what happens until then. We gave all kinds of show recommendations this week. So go watch those. You can go watch chimps eating other monkeys, Black Mirror, Suits, Would I Lie to You, all kinds of stuff. Because I don't think there is any soccer, and God knows you don't want to watch freaking baseball, people. So
yeah, don't watch baseball, and if you can, avoid the Gold Cup unless you suffer from insomnia, and then that shit will put you to sleep.
I hear baseball got a lot better because the pitch clock has changed. Just kidding. It's the same shit, people.
It's the same shit. Just like the Gold Cup.
Actually, I heard baseball people even say it got so much better because it got so much faster. But ultimately, it's still the same freaking game. So I'm going to have to pass. So watch the shows. Hang in there for another week. The boys will be back, and we'll be able to watch some preseason games and actually talk about some soccer and performances instead of people's tweets and who's saying what and stuff like that. Have an awesome week, everybody. See you guys next week. Take care.